Imagine a world where water wasn't your friend. It was your enemy. Where taking a bath wasn't a sign of cleanliness, it was considered dangerous, sinful, or even deadly. Sounds ridiculous, right? But for most of human history, that's exactly how people lived. And they didn't just avoid showers because they were lazy. They had reasons. Really strange, really disturbing reasons. And wait till you hear what they did instead of bathing. Let's start with Europe in the Middle Ages. If you walked into a village back then, the smell would hit you before anything else. Body odor, rotting food, dirty streets, and chamber pots emptied right into the roads. People rarely bathed. And when they did, it wasn't the relaxing bubble bath you're imagining. But here's the thing. They weren't just skipping baths because they didn't care. They believed water could kill you. No joke. People actually thought that bathing opened up your skin and let disease crawl inside. So if there was a plague going around, you better keep your clothes on and your pores sealed. Doctors even warned against bathing too much. Some even said once a year was plenty. And people followed that advice. Kings, queens, rich nobles, they might go months without touching water. Queen Isabella of Spain proudly claimed she had only bathed twice in her life, once when she was born and once when she got married. That wasn't a joke, that was a flex. So how did people clean themselves? Well, they didn't. Or worse, they faked it. They'd dust themselves with powders, rub on perfumes, or carry little bags of herbs under their arms to mask the smell. Their version of deodorant was just not being the worst-smelling person in the room. And you know what else they believed? They thought clothes could clean you. Yep, many believed that changing into fresh clothes meant you were getting clean. They'd wear linen undergarments that absorbed sweat and grime, and when those got nasty, they'd just toss them and feel cleansed. It gets even weirder. Some nobles actually believed the more layers you wore, the more dirt your clothes would soak up. So instead of washing their bodies, they just kept putting more and more clothes on. Think of it like being wrapped in a self-cleaning burrito of filth. And then there were the communal sweat lodges and bathhouses. Now, in earlier centuries, places like ancient Rome had public bathhouses, where hygiene was a whole thing. But by medieval times, bathhouses had a, let's just say, different reputation. They became hotspots for gambling, drinking, and sometimes, brothels. So much so that the church started calling bathhouses sinful, saying they led to moral decay. By the 14th century, many were shut down entirely. No baths, no sins, problem solved, right? And then came the Black Death. When the plague started sweeping across Europe in the 1300s, people panicked. They didn't know about germs or how disease spread, so they blamed it on bad smells, the miasma theory. They believed that disease traveled through foul odors in the air, which meant bathing, especially in warm water that opened your pores, was a death sentence. So people covered themselves in filth, layered up and doused themselves in perfumes to seal in their health. Yeah, that was their plan. Smell worse, die slower. Now, if you think medieval Europe was bad, wait till you hear how the ancient Romans treated bathing. Because here's the twist. They actually loved it. Public bathhouses were everywhere. People went daily, sometimes multiple times a day. And these weren't just a quick rinse and run. Roman baths were massive, like community centers. You'd go there to gossip, relax, eat, get a massage, or maybe catch up on politics while scrubbing your armpits. But here's the gross part. These places were disgusting. Thousands of people using the same water, not just to bathe, but to relieve themselves too, that's right. Some Roman bathhouses didn't even have proper sewage separation, and sponges were shared. No soap, just a stick with a sponge on the end, dipped in vinegar. Used communally. For everything, you know what I mean. So while they were cleaner by their standards, they were also walking petri dishes. And when Rome fell, so did their love for public hygiene. The bathhouses collapsed, and the paranoia began. Fast forward a few centuries and we're in Tudor England. Now this era was a wild mix of superstition and fashion. People wore layers, lots of layers, and guess what? They still weren't bathing. Queen Elizabeth I famously claimed to take a bath once a month, whether she needed it or not. But what about everyone else? They used dry cloths to rub themselves down. That was their version of a shower. The rich sprayed themselves with rose water or citrus oil. Poor folks just hoped for the best. And here's something creepy. It was normal to share bath water. A whole family might reuse the same tub. Dad goes first, then Mom, then the kids. By the time baby's in the water, it's a murky soup of dirt and sweat and God knows what else. And yes, that's where the saying, "Don't throw the baby out with the bath water," comes from. It was literal. Even barbers back then didn't just cut hair. They pulled teeth, performed bloodletting, and sometimes even cleaned people by scraping off their skin with rough cloths or blades. Not exactly a spa day. Meanwhile, in 17th century France, people got extra creative. The French nobility wore powdered wigs, thick makeup and heavy perfume, all to hide the fact that they stank. Versailles might have looked like a palace in the paintings, but behind those walls, people peed in the hallways. There were no toilets, no plumbing, just chamber pots or corners. And still bathing was rare. They believed water could transmit disease through the skin, so doctors warned against it. Even Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, supposedly only bathed twice in his life. And when he got sick, he was bled, purged, and wrapped in linens instead of being given a simple bath. Oh, and peasants, forget about it. They didn't have the luxury of perfumed powders or linen undergarments. Most of them just didn't wash at all unless it rained. And when it did, that was their bath day. People would run into the rain, splash around a little, and call it good. But let's take a quick detour now, because not every culture avoided water. In places like Japan, bathing was a ritual. In ancient India, daily washing was considered holy. The Islamic world built beautiful bathhouses and promoted cleanliness as a virtue. And in indigenous cultures across Africa and the Americas, water and hygiene were deeply respected, often tied to spirituality and health. So why was Europe so obsessed with avoiding baths? Part of it was religion. After the fall of Rome, the Christian church began to frown on public baths, saying they encouraged vanity and sin, especially if men and women were bathing near each other. So the church told people to focus on the soul, not the body. Clean hearts, dirty feet. And the longer that idea stuck, the worse things got. Whole generations grew up thinking soap was suspicious, hot water was dangerous, and anyone who liked being clean was probably some kind of pervert or heretic. And we haven't even gotten to the Victorians yet. Now let's step into the Victorian era, where things somehow got even weirder. Victorians were obsessed with manners, modesty, and looking respectable, but when it came to hygiene, oh boy. Picture this. You're wearing 5 layers of tightly laced clothing, including a corset that's slowly crushing your ribs, and you haven't had a proper bath in a month. Instead, you've dabbed your body with vinegar or rose water, maybe brushed your teeth with charcoal or crushed seashells, that's it. That's Many women avoided washing their hair entirely because it was such a hassle. So instead of cleaning it, they'd powder it, braid it, and pin it up, weeks at a time. No shampoo, no rinsing, just build up dirt and whatever insects decided to make a home in there. And yes, lice were practically a fashion accessory. Hair combs weren't just for styling. They were also used to dig out nits, fleas, and dandruff flakes the size of coins. Romantic, right? Now here's the kicker. Rich Victorians didn't like bathing, but they absolutely hated body odor, so they layered on perfume. Not just a few drops. Gallons. They would drench themselves in colognes that smelled like lavender, bergamot, even crushed animals. Seriously, ambergris, a substance found in whale intestines, was a luxury scent. And the poorer classes? They couldn't afford perfume or fancy clothes. They worked in coal mines, factories, slaughterhouses. They smelled like it. And they slept in the same clothes they wore all week, sometimes all month. And still, people weren't bathing. But here's where things get dark. Doctors in this era started writing about a mysterious condition called miasma, the idea that bad smells carried diseases. Not germs, not bacteria, just bad air. So instead of washing their bodies, Victorians would open windows, hang air fresheners, or carry nosegays, little bouquets of herbs to sniff when the stench got too strong. That's right. You'd walk through London with a mini plant shoved in your nose just to avoid the stench of raw sewage, horse droppings, and unwashed humans. And public toilets barely existed. Chamber pots were emptied into the streets. Rivers ran black with waste. The Thames was so foul in 1858 that Parliament shut down because the smell was too unbearable to govern. They called it the Great Stink. Even Queen Victoria had to flee the palace more than once, just to escape the smell. And yet the idea of daily bathing, still considered excessive. Even doctors were suspicious of soap. They thought washing too often could cause skin problems, weaken your immune system, or even invite madness. Some believed water could open the pores and let in evil spirits. So instead of promoting hygiene, they gave people weird advice like, rub your skin with dry towels or sniff lavender when near the pore. There were even warning labels on soap. I kid you not. Some soap manufacturers had to convince people that their products wouldn't rot your skin or destroy your soul. It took decades before people began to trust that maybe, just maybe, washing your body wouldn't kill you. Meanwhile, barbers were still doing double duty. You could get a haircut and a leeching in one visit. And in some hospitals, doctors would perform autopsies in the morning and deliver babies in the afternoon without washing their hands in between. Because germs weren't even discovered yet. Imagine living in a time when people thought boogers caused the plague and taking a bath could invite death. That's where we were. And here's the crazy part. Despite all this filth, people still blamed the poor for disease. If you got sick, it wasn't because your surgeon sneezed into your open wound. It was because you were unclean in spirit. Meanwhile, noble women were passing out from corsets soaked in their own sweat, and gentlemen were powdering their armpits instead of scrubbing them. It's almost poetic in a disgusting way. Let's fast forward into the early 1900s, when soap was finally starting to catch on, but people still didn't really understand how to use it. This was the golden age of ridiculous hygiene products, and the marketing, hilariously terrifying. Companies didn't just sell you soap, they sold you fear. Afraid your husband would leave you? It's probably your underarm odor. That was the message of one real ad from the 1920s. A woman stares into the mirror with the headline, Why didn't somebody tell me? Below, in bold letters, BO, body odor, is ruining lives. And it worked. Suddenly having a natural scent meant you were dirty, unattractive, even morally flawed. People started obsessing over deodorants, powders, breath mints, hair tonics, antifungal pastes, anything to stay acceptable. And companies weren't subtle. There were actual ads warning women they'd never find love if they didn't wash their elbows properly. Some even suggested women who didn't smell fresh were mentally unstable. It wasn't just women either. Men were also targeted. One soap ad showed a businessman being mocked behind his back by co-workers. Why? His hands looked too greasy. The ad warned he might lose his job and his self-respect. We went from avoiding baths entirely to being so obsessed with cleanliness that people were rubbing bleach on their skin to stay white, or pouring alcohol into their ears to clean their brain waves. That's not a joke. And don't even get me started on the devices. The early 20th century gave us some of the most insane hygiene inventions in history, like the toilet mask, a gas mask-style contraption women wore while sleeping to prevent airborne dirt from touching their faces. Or the scalp vacuum, a machine that looked like a torture device but promised to remove dandruff through suction, and the armpit clamp, which was supposed to hold deodorant powder under your arms all day. Imagine wearing a spring-loaded clamp inside your shirt just to not smell like a human. People were so desperate not to be gross that they bought electric soap bars, tongue scrapers shaped like fishhooks and earwax drills. And it still wasn't enough. Magazines printed long lists of cleanliness habits everyone was expected to follow. Some of them made sense, like brushing your teeth, but others completely deranged. One guide said if you wore the same pair of socks twice in a row, you were no better than a rat. Another said true ladies change underwear 3 times a day, even if they don't leave the house. But here's the twist. While the middle class was panic buying deodorant crystals and baking soda toothpaste, the wealthy elite was still cheating the system. Rich people would send their laundry to be sun-bleached instead of washed, because soap was seen as too harsh. They hired servants to scrub them with dry brushes, never touching water. Some paid extra for exotic bathing rituals involving milk, wine, or mashed fruit. Cleopatra style, but grosser. And then there were the traveling salesmen. Oh boy. These guys would roll into town with carts full of miracle cleansing powders that were actually just crushed chalk and arsenic. They'd perform fake science tricks, like making dirt disappear by mixing soap with vinegar, and promise it would cure baldness, stuttering, and bad dreams. People believe them. Desperation makes you gullible. And speaking of dreams, did you know there were sleep coaches in the 1930s who said not washing your feet before bed could curse your future children? They'd write pamphlets with titles like Nighttime Decay, What Your Sheets Know About You. Completely unhinged stuff. But the damage was done. Cleanliness wasn't just about health anymore. It became a form of social control. If you smelled bad, had oily hair, or even had the wrong brand of soap in your house, you could lose friends, jobs, marriage prospects. Some kids were pulled out of school for showing up with unclean fingernails. And once again, it was the poor who paid the price. Public schools inspected students' hygiene. Tenement housing blocks had smell checks. Even during the Great Depression, when people were starving, they were told to look clean or be ashamed. So yeah, we finally accepted bathing. But we wrapped it in shame, fear, and impossible standards. And we weren't even done yet. By the mid-20th century, things got even weirder. Now people weren't just bathing more, they were trusting science they didn't understand, and it nearly killed them. This was the atomic age. Everything had to sound futuristic, scientific, and powerful. That meant soap wasn't just soap anymore. It was germ-killing, radioactive, clinically enhanced, nuclear clean. Yes, radioactive hygiene products were real. There were toothpastes with uranium, face creams that glowed in the dark, even deodorants laced with thorium, a radioactive metal, because people believed it gave them energy. All of it approved by marketing teams who didn't care if it made your skin fall off. The worst offender? A product called Radithor, a bottled health drink made of pure radioactive water. People used it as a mouth rinse. A man named Eben Byers drank so much of it, his jaw literally disintegrated. That's not hyperbole. His bones turned to powder, but ads kept calling it the drink that never lets you down. Meanwhile, in homes across America and Europe, bathroom cabinets were stuffed with hazardous chemicals, proudly displayed as signs of modern hygiene. Arsenic to shrink your pores, mercury to lighten your skin, bleach to clear up acne, formaldehyde to clean your scalp. It wasn't a routine, it was chemical warfare on your body. And the government? They joined in. In the 1950s and 60s, public health campaigns started turning hygiene into a moral obligation. Schools aired cartoons warning kids that dirty ears lead to sadness. Military ads told soldiers that if they didn't scrub between their toes, they were weaker than the enemy. One U.S. Army hygiene guide literally said, "A man who stinks cannot serve with honor." And then there was the germ panic. After World War II, people became obsessed with the invisible. Suddenly, everything was about germs. Soap had to kill 99.9% of bacteria, even though most of those bacteria were harmless. Disinfectants were sprayed on everything, from sidewalks to food. Parents were told to boil baby bottles, bleach their floors daily, and wash hands every 30 minutes. One ad even said, "If you don't sterilize your doorknobs, your family could die." Super comforting. Companies saw this fear and ran with it. That's when antibacterial everything became the norm. Even in places it made no sense, like antibacterial pencils, or antibacterial napkins, or toothbrushes with razor edges to scrape deeper between your gums. Some even cut people's mouths. And here's the punchline. By trying to kill every germ, we started creating superbugs, bacteria that became resistant to soap, antibiotics, even bleach. In other words, our obsession with staying clean made us sicker. But nobody wanted to admit that, so instead they doubled down. TV commercials in the 70s showed mothers crying because their kids had dandruff. Deodorant ads told men they wouldn't be respected if their armpits weren't mountain fresh. Women were told their husbands would leave them for soapier women. Even underwear ads got dark. One featured a man sniffing his partner's laundry, smiling, until his face twists in disgust. The message: don't be the reason he stops loving you. And just when you think we hit peak madness, enter the hygiene gadgets of the future. The 1980s gave us electronic nose fresheners, tiny devices that zap your nostrils with minty air. There were mouth lasers designed to vaporize bad breath, and ultrasonic toilets that claimed to clean your soul. Not joking. Oh, and let's not forget the infamous public bathroom paranoia. People were so afraid of germs that they invented entire behaviors we still use today. Like the toilet paper seat cover, which does almost nothing, but feels important. Or the technique of flushing the toilet with your foot, which is somehow more sanitary, until everyone's doing it and the handle is dirtier than ever. At this point, people weren't even trying to be clean, they were trying to be perfect, scrubbed raw, perfumed to the bone, disinfected out of fear. And yet, under all the products, the slogans, and the glittery commercials, one old truth remained: people still didn't fully understand how to be clean. They were terrified of body odor, but didn't understand sweat. They thought soap was magic, but ignored water quality. They invented whole industries based on lies, shame, and radioactive chemicals, just to avoid smelling human. And that brings us to the modern day. You might think we've evolved, but have we? Today we live in a world where you can order 20 different soaps, all made from goat's milk, lavender oil, activated charcoal, and volcanic ash, and still end up with skin problems no medieval peasant ever had. Because somehow we've made hygiene more confusing than ever. It's not just about washing anymore, now it's a ritual, a lifestyle, a status symbol. You're not clean unless your soap is handcrafted in the Swiss Alps by blind monks. You're not fresh unless your deodorant is aluminum-free, vegan, cruelty-free, and costs more than a nice dinner. And your bathroom isn't hygienic unless it looks like a wellness influencer's spa. But here's the twist. We've gone so far in the direction of overcleaning that it's hurting us again. Let's talk about skin microbiomes. Yeah, that thing most people ignore. Your skin isn't just a blank surface. It's an ecosystem. It's covered in trillions of bacteria, most of them good. They protect you from disease, balance your pH, and even fight acne. But guess what happens when you overclean? You destroy them. And then you get irritated skin, eczema, mystery breakouts. So what do? You buy more products, stronger products, peel off layers, start over. The cycle continues. Even worse, people are falling for viral hygiene hacks that make absolutely no sense. Like the TikTok trend where people clean their armpits with rubbing alcohol every day to kill odor. Newsflash, it burns, and it strips your skin barrier so badly that you sweat more. For influencers saying you should brush your teeth with hydrogen peroxide to whiten them, sure, for a week you'll look like a toothpaste commercial. Then your gums start bleeding. Tiny detail. And don't forget the lemon juice craze, where people literally wipe their armpits, faces, and private parts with acidic fruit, all in the name of natural hygiene. If medieval people could see that, they'd think we were being punished by demons. But somehow this all gets glamorized, because the packaging is minimalist. The influencers look rich, and the word clean has evolved into a whole aesthetic. Even dirty is being rebranded. Ever heard of the no-shower movement? There are people proudly going weeks without bathing, claiming their body naturally balances itself. Some call it ancestral hygiene. Others say it's biohacking. One guy even said he stopped showering for a year and never smelled better. Someone should have asked his roommates. This isn't just an internet thing. Companies are cashing in. There are now non-soap soaps that are basically scented water. There are dry shampoos that don't clean your hair. They just trick your eyes. And the best part, people are paying $40 for them, while medieval folks just dunked their heads in rivers and got the same results, minus the coconut scent. Then there's the fear marketing, still alive and thriving. Hand sanitizer ads warning of airborne death. Toilet spray commercials saying your entire house smells like shame. Feminine hygiene brands still pushing the myth that women are unclean without their pH-balancing miracle soap. And if that's not enough, social media takes it further. There are now ranking systems for hygiene routines. Videos where people proudly declare, "I take 4 showers a day." and then comment sections explode with praise or judgment. Did you use bar soap or body wash? Did you exfoliate twice? What's your scent layering strategy? Did you rinse your belly button? It's not about health anymore. It's about performance. And the result? People are anxious, insecure, and confused. Kids as young as 10 are being told they smell weird. Teenagers are bleaching their body hair. Grown adults are afraid of sweating in public, even though it's the most human thing you can do. We've somehow created a world where being alive feels gross, unless you mask every part of it. And here's the biggest irony of all. Despite all the technology, all the money, all the soap, we're still asking the same questions ancient people did. Why do I smell? Am I clean enough? Will people like me more if I scrub harder? The tools changed, the fears didn't. Cleanliness was never just about being clean. It was about power. And once that idea took root, civilizations started using it. Not to stay healthy, but to divide, control, and shame. Ancient Rome didn't just build bathhouses to wash. They built them to show dominance, to say, we are civilized, they are not. The idea was simple. If you didn't scrub your body in public marble pools, you were less than, barbaric, dirty, unworthy of citizenship. It wasn't about dirt, it was about identity, and that logic never went away. In the Victorian era, cleanliness became morality. Good people bathed, bad people didn't. Clean meant pure, dirty meant sinful. Suddenly, if your body had odor or imperfections, it was seen as a flaw in your character, a weakness of the soul. Entire religions latched onto this. Purity laws, ritual washings, taboos about menstruation, childbirth, even touching the sick. They weren't based on science. They were about spiritual control. If you didn't follow the cleanliness rules, you weren't just dirty, you were unholy. And that made it easy to shame entire groups of people. Poor immigrant, sick, disabled, suddenly you're unclean. And once someone is labeled unclean, society treats them like garbage. You can deny them work, blame them for disease, keep them out of schools, churches, cities, because they're just filthy. That mindset crept into colonization too. European colonizers didn't just steal land, they framed indigenous people as savages, unclean, uncivilized, unwashed. That story made the conquest seem noble, like they were bringing soap and salvation to people who had neither. But of course, many of those indigenous societies had their own hygiene rituals, some far better suited to their climate than the heavy perfumes and tight corsets the Europeans brought with them. Still, the damage was done. Cleanliness became a tool of cultural erasure. And later, during industrialization, corporations saw a gold mine. They realized they could create entire markets out of shame. Step 1. Invent a problem. Step 2. Sell the solution. They told women their breath was repulsive, that their sweat was offensive, that their skin should be whiter, their hair smoother, their armpits odorless. And if they failed at that, they wouldn't get married. They wouldn't be respected. They'd die alone, unloved, and smelling like disappointment. And people bought it, literally. Soap, powder, spray, bleach, toner, lotion, serum, each one promising salvation from the imaginary dirt they just convinced you had. And the same pattern still works today. Modern ads are cleaner, more inclusive, more ethical on the surface, but they whisper the same poison. You're not quite good enough. But if you buy this product, maybe you will be. Even the tech world is in on it. Smart toothbrushes, skin-analyzing mirrors, apps that track your washing habits, Hygiene is now gamified, tracked, graded, monetized. It's not about your health. It's about your data. And all of this, and the history, the fear, the manipulation, creates a world where hygiene isn't freedom anymore. It's surveillance. People feel watched, judged, compared. Every smell, stain, scar are seen as a failure, something to be scrubbed away, hidden, filtered. We made being human feel wrong. Here's the truth. Cleanliness, the way we know it today, isn't ancient. It isn't natural. It's not even really about health anymore. It's a story. A story we've been sold for centuries. A story written by empires, religions, corporations, and marketers. One that says, if you want to be good, be clean. If you want to be clean, obey. But what if the dirt never meant danger? What if the dirt just meant life? You see, the human body was never meant to be sterile. Our skin, our gut, even our breath, all filled with billions of bacteria. Some harmful, yes, but many protective, balanced, essential. They evolved with us, not against us, but we declared war on them. Antibacterial everything, bleach, hand sanitizer, a world scrubbed raw. And now, we're more allergic, more anxious, more isolated. Our immune systems confused, our minds overstimulated, our bodies disconnected. In chasing total cleanliness, we lost something human. In medieval times, people may not have bathed often, but they touched the earth. They smelled like their world. They shared space, stories, and sweat. Their lives were short, yes, but grounded, physical, real. We, on the other hand, live in plastic boxes, pump artificial air, scrub away every trace of our natural scent, then wonder why we feel so hollow. We fear our own skin, and maybe, just maybe, we were never meant to live like this. Maybe being a little dirty was never the problem. Maybe the real sickness is the fear we've been sold. Fear of being natural, of being flawed, of being seen. Fear that if we don't keep up with the soap, the scent, the smile, we'll be rejected, unloved, forgotten. But dirt doesn't make us unlovable. It makes us human. So the next time you feel gross, the next time someone tries to sell you a miracle scrub or shame you into feeling less than perfect, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, who benefits from my fear? Because maybe, just maybe, being a little dirty isn't the end of the world. Maybe it's the beginning of freedom. But there's one last final piece of this story, one that ties it all together, the part we often forget or maybe were never taught. The way we think about cleanliness didn't just shape how people lived. It shaped how we judge history itself. When we picture the Middle Ages or the ancient world, we imagine filth, rotting teeth, muddy streets, smelly peasants. But what we don't realize is a lot of those images were planted there, deliberately. In the Victorian era, when cleanliness became tied to morality and class, British scholars rewrote history with their noses turned up. They looked back at ancient times and said, how disgusting, how primitive, how uncivilized. They used soap as a weapon, cleanliness as a mark of superiority. Their message was simple: we're better than them. But what if the truth was more complicated? Take ancient Egypt. Bathing twice a day wasn't unusual. They used natron salts, perfumed oils, and exfoliation techniques that wouldn't look out of place in a modern spa. Public hygiene was integrated into their cities. Or ancient Rome. They built sprawling bathhouses complete with hot and cold pools, massage rooms and steam chambers. Bathing was social, even political. It wasn't just about getting clean, it was about being Roman. Even in medieval Europe, the idea that people never bathed is exaggerated. Many towns had public bathhouses until the church started linking nudity and bathing with sin. After that, things changed, not because people didn't want to bathe, but because power made it shameful. In Japan, bathing rituals were sacred. Communal baths were part of daily life, rooted in Shinto purity beliefs, not just comfort. In Islamic civilizations, cleanliness was next to godliness, literally. Ritual washing before prayer was mandatory. Cities had aqueducts, fountains, and bathhouses centuries before Europe caught up. So how did we forget all this? Simple. Colonial narratives, Eurocentric textbooks, sanitized history that framed the West as the peak of civilization, and everyone else as backwards, dirty, uncultured. It wasn't about truth, it was about control. Because if your enemy is dirty, their suffering seems deserved. If your ancestors were clean, their conquests seem justified. If your culture is pure, you feel superior. So the idea that people in the past were disgusting? It's not history, it's propaganda. And it worked. Even today you'll hear people talk about how medieval peasants never bathed, or how ancient people didn't care about hygiene. We repeat these stories without asking, who told us that, and why? It makes us laugh, makes us feel better, makes us forget that we too live in a world built on control, on appearances, on shame. The truth is, dirt isn't the enemy, and neither is the past. But lies are. So maybe next time someone tells you history was gross, lean in, ask questions, look deeper. Because history isn't just about kings and wars and dates. It's about us, what we fear, what we hide, what we were taught to believe. And sometimes the dirtiest secrets are the cleanest lies.